how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 147, and I sat down and spoke with Eric Kellum. He is in Virginia, so we did this over FaceTime. He is a pastor there in Virginia, and he has a book coming out. When this episode airs, it will be March 7th. The book comes out March 8th, so good timing. The book is called Sexual Healing, A Man's Sexual Journey and the Lessons Learned Along the Way. Eric is extraordinarily open and honest about his porn addiction and recovery, and that is the basis of our discussion. We talk about religion and addiction and childhood trauma and all sorts of things. Really, really great information, interesting, and again, very open and honest man. Check out his book for sure. I'll put links on the links page of heyhumanpodcast.com that will lead you to the Amazon place where you can purchase Eric's book. It's on Kindle right now, and it's also going to be on hardcover too. So that is exciting. Usual stuff. Again, I mentioned the links page. I will put a lot of stuff on there for this episode, as I do every episode. But I do want to mention just right now a resource for anyone suffering or feeling like they're in the grips of addiction, or maybe their family members or children or coworkers or friends or whatnot. Here's a resource. It's Boys Town Hotline, and that's for anyone. You don't have to be a boy. Boys Town Hotline for men, women, children, parents, whatever. And the phone number there is 800-448-3000. And Eric was also very gracious and offered to give everyone his email, ek1speaks@gmail.com, if you want to reach out to him as well. So, usual stuff, of course. Social media, Hey Human Podcast. I'm on all the podcast places. On Twitter, however, I am under Susan Ruthism. I'm also Instagram, Facebook for that too. But Hey Human Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. Susan Ruthism, Twitter, Facebook, and also Instagram. I'm all over the place. You can also find me at susanruth.com. And my music is on iTunes under Susan Ruth. I only mention that because it's great to get that out there, but also it helps sort of support the whole creative process, keeping this podcast ad-free as long as I humanly can, which means I rely on other resources to help support the podcast, including the Amazon portal, which is on the heyhumanpodcast.com website. When you click on heyhumanpodcast.com, you'll see the Amazon portal. You click on that, you shop Amazon just like you do normally, and it helps support Hey Human. So thank you for that, for those of you that do that. Also, there is a support button on the heyhumanpodcast.com website. So I have now said heyhumanpodcast.com many, many times, so I hope you don't mind. You can email me, susan@heyhumanpodcast.com. Happily, I will read your emails and answer them as best as I can. Next week's episode is going to be with a man who is a bail bondsman. I'm tripping over my tongue on that one. He's a bail bondsman, which I formerly called a bounty hunter, but after talking with him, I know now not to call them bounty hunters because that's really a bit derogatory apparently. So it's good to know that. I'm learning every time I sit down with someone. So that's upcoming next week. Everyone, thank you for listening. There's so many things to listen to. I know that the airwaves are crowded, and I'm very appreciative that you choose to listen to Hey Human, and I hope you continue to do so. And yeah, all right, shall we? Here we go. Hey Eric, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for being on Hey Human. I really appreciate your time.
I really appreciate being able to sit down with you.
Yeah, it's good to meet you.
Same here.
And you're in Virginia somewhere?
I am in Triangle, Virginia, right beside Quantico.
Oh.
We hear a lot of noises from the base.
That must be interesting.
It is interesting.
Any UFOs?
Not that they've publicized.
You haven't seen anything suspicious?
No, I haven't.
No.
Yeah.
Well, so I learned of you through Shay Littlejohn, who she's been on the show, and I adore she's amazing. And she's your sister-in-law or your sister?
She's my sister.
Yeah, your sister. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's awesome. Is she your little sister?
No, actually, I'm the baby.
You're the baby.
But I think I probably look the oldest now. We have Shay, and then I have another sister, and I have more gray than both of them. So
I haven't seen any gray on her yet. So.
Yeah, I think she hides it pretty well, but let's not. That'll be just between you and I, and none of your listeners.
She's getting married this year. Are you going to the wedding? Will I see you there?
Oh, man. Wow. You're putting me publicly on there. I told her we have a business that we're trying to launch with the books, and my son's graduating, and my wife and I are renewing our vows. And I say, you pick, not only do you pick to get married, we could drive to Tennessee. You decided to go to Utah.
I know. It's sort of random, isn't it?
And she told me, well, I'm going to still be selfish, and if you have to go into debt, then do so, because it's my wedding. So I'm like, that's a great sister, a loving sister, you know?
She only, she's getting married once, so,
Yeah. You're going?
Yeah, I think so. That's the plan.
Oh my gosh.
It threw me off for her to be in Utah. I'm like, Utah! But,
right.
Yeah. The things we do. So
but if you have any listeners from Utah, we're not bashing Utah.
No, Utah is beautiful. I've been there a couple times just to get there, like you said, from across the country can be a little nutty.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Shay said you should talk to Eric and listen to his story, and she told me a little bit about you, and I said, absolutely, I'm in. So the name of the book that you have just finished writing is Sexual Healing, A Man's Sexual Journey and the Lessons Learned Along the Way. Mm-hmm. And I have read the book, and I really enjoyed it. And I want to go all the way back, of course, but let's just start in the moment. What made you decide to write this book?
Well, I tell folks I wrote the book because my wife and I have amazing sex, but that's my one-liner just to provoke people and get their attention. The line behind that is that I remember a time when we did not have amazing sex. I remember a time where we felt like we were not clicking on any cylinders, and I had let certain issues bleed into our intimacy. I didn't even know what intimacy was, if I could be, honest with myself and just looking back. And I think a lot of men probably don't. And so when I got to this place where I finally discovered a communication with my wife that was absolutely amazing, beyond words, I just started to wonder how many other guys went through the same journey. And then, I also happen to be a pastor, which makes the book even more interesting. And just counseling and just sitting down with couples, my wife and I just realized, wow, this is a big issue. It's a big deal. And so 3 years ago, I started on this journey, and here we are today.
How long have you been a pastor?
I've been a pastor since 2012.
Okay.
So it's been about 4.5 years.
And what year did you get married?
No, wait. That's 6.5 years. Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
When you get to a certain age.
I know, I get
it. We got married in 1999, August 14th. So it'll be 20 years in August.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
That is quite a milestone.
Yeah.
So the impetus for this book, as you said, was to say, hey, my wife and I have amazing sex, but it wasn't always like that. Let's now go back to the very beginning. And
sure. You're
a little kid, and you begin your sexual journey how?
Yeah, so I referenced in the book that I had unofficial sexual education, which I think a lot of people, particularly males, go through. Sometimes it's welcomed, and you're exploring out of curiosity. Sometimes it's brought to your attention and you don't realize it. I can't say that it was anything traumatic that I know that some other folks do have. But I do remember, innocently just sitting at home while my grandmother's watching Wheel of Fortune, and she's falling asleep by the time you get to Jeopardy. And I'm curious on the TV control, and I discovered a Playboy channel. Now, my grandmother wasn't into Playboy. I don't want anybody to get the wrong impression. But I had a cousin who had a way with configuring and maneuvering the cable box, and he was able to get Playboy on there. That same cousin, he was babysitting us one day, and he was nowhere around, and me and my other cousins were just playing. I went to look for him, and I walked in and discovered him in an act looking like he was hurting some young lady. But then it finally clicked in, okay, no, he's not hurting her. And this was 8 years old.
Sure.
So now you're unpacking a curiosity. You don't know what to do with it. I keep going back, waiting for my grandmother to go to sleep to continue to go back to that particular channel. As I get older in middle school, I'm introduced to hardcore porn. And, you just kind of avalanches from there. And that, in addition to the reality that no one sat down and had the conversation of what sexuality was really about. My foster dad, and Shay's my foster sister. They brought me in to the home when I was 12 years old, and I lived with Shay, my foster parents, when I was 12. And I had a great foster father. He is a great man. He has been a complete role model. But we never had that conversation. And I bring that up, Susan, because, I surveyed 100 men when I was writing this book. And I realized that from this limited poll that I created, out of 100, 83% would say that they did not have a conversation with their dad about sex. And a follow-up question is, well, how did you discover it? Their response prominently was that either I figured it out or I just learned from watching porn. And that's really a big deal. So that's my story, and that's kind of what got me into trouble as I was going down this path of sexuality.
Did you have, as you were developing your own sexual understanding as a teenager, how old were you when you lost your virginity?
I was 17 when I lost my virginity, but at that point I was on a mission to prove that I could lose my virginity because, again, no one explained what had happened, and I ran into a situation a couple of years prior where I felt like I had to convince myself of something. And what it was, I was a sophomore in high school, and I was dating this freshman, which, when you're a sophomore, you can't date the juniors or seniors. At least I couldn't, because I didn't have a car and I wasn't an upperclassman. So we sophomores, we looked for the freshman that came in, and she was supposed to be quite the catch. Our terminology back in the 1990s, she was fly. That was our terminology in Dayton, Ohio. And we were in the upperclassmen were sweating her, but she was into me. So I'm like, all right, great. I got this fly girl. I found out very soon that she had a very fast reputation, and that didn't mean that she was on a track team, which is crazy because she was a freshman and she was 14, but she already had the reputation that she was fast. So, at the lunchroom, guys are saying, hey, man, this particular lady, I don't reveal names in the book.
No, of course.
She's, when are you going to hit that? When are you going to have sex with her? And, what we do in high school as men, we just lie about our sexuality because, I didn't want to let them know, well, I'm a virgin and I'm not really pressed to do that. But, what do you do? So a situation comes about. She is alone in my house, and we are supposed to have sex. This is supposed to be my first time. I don't even think she knew it was my first time. And it's really funny. I want to pause to share this part because I'll never forget it. I don't know if you followed wrestling, but Macho Man Randy Savage was like a prominent wrestler in the 1990s, and he had a theme song. It really, it's like a famous symphony, and I forgot the name of it, but it's what they play for graduations. Yeah, that's Pomp and Circumstance. That was every time he came out to that song. Well, for me, this is like one of those Wonder Years situations. Like when she was unsnapping her bra, it was like that theme song was in my head. And it was like this discovery, like this is really happening. This is wow. And so there she is in the complete nude before me. And I can't get erect. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? Like, this is the first time I'm dealing with like, erectile dysfunction at the age of 15 or 16 years old, and I'm squinting and thinking really hard trying to make that happen, and nothing happens, and she snickers and laughs, and I know from the snicker that this is not going to be good. Long story short, she goes home. We don't say anything. I don't even know if we're together still at that point, but I'm guessing we're not. I don't go to school on Monday. This all happened on the weekend. And she has spread the word throughout the entire school about our situation, about our episode. And my best friend called me and told me, and for the next 2 weeks, I had to live that down. And that just put an additional pressure and issue upon me to really think about, well, what's going on? What's wrong? What did I do wrong? And started questioning certain things. And so at that point, I was at a pursuit, and I was on a mission to prove something to myself, which I really didn't have to, but it just continued to go down this avalanche of just building.
Looking back, I mean, first of all, the fact that kids, really little kids, even have to have this in their wheelhouse is extraordinary. And your story is not uncommon. Obviously, kids today get a lot, if not most of their information from pornography. It's statistically, it's insane. The statistics, they start looking at it as young as 7 and 8 years old, as you were talking about with the Playboy channel. Now, did you equate, as an 8-year-old, what you were watching on the TV? Did it arouse you? And did you equate it with those feelings so that then at 14, when you were faced with the real thing, suddenly you're in the presence of a human being, and it's a whole different scenario than what you've probably been programmed to Pavlovian expect out of pornography?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I'm pretty sure that, looking at it at 8 years old, I don't know if I would say I was at the place of like arousal, but more so a pleasant curiosity. Like, wow, look at her. And let me see where this goes. The whole, when I went back and I started to unpack as an adult what took place with that particular young lady when I was a sophomore, I realized, I've even though I practiced this behavior later on at 17 and 18, where I did a one night stand or a hit it and quit it type of thing, that was never my mantra. That wasn't, I felt like it was supposed to be something. The whole act of sexual sex was supposed to be something that evolved out of a relationship and a connection. And when it didn't operate in that way, it was very foreign. And me and this particular young lady, I don't even know if we knew each other's last names. Like, it was that foreign and that strange. We were just together because we were supposed to be together according to societal norms of what's popular and all this other superficial stuff. So, not knowing how to process that, but only reading into the peer pressure as a young person, I think that was where the struggle came in.
Yeah. And one also thinks about the fact that a 14-year-old sexually active girl probably had a lot going on in her life that you weren't aware of at the time, but now as an adult can go, oh, well, clearly that's not necessarily the norm.
Yeah, see, that really hits because I have 4 daughters now, and one is 14. She'll be 15 on Saturday. And just really thinking about, like, I think she ended up getting pregnant early. Like, I didn't, if I'm not mistaken.
That girl
later
from high school? Yeah,
which I mean, unfortunately and sadly makes a lot of sense. I think both of us were looking for a sense of an identity, which a lot of people try to do through sexuality. And, I mean, it's a sad reality that, that was 1990 something. I mean, how much more has that been intensified now that we're in 2019,
Right. We'll definitely get to that because that's a big deal. So as you're developing through your teen and early 20s, and you were on, as you put in the book, you're on these conquests, did you understand yourself enough to know that you were developing an addiction to pornography and
I think the addiction came when I really at some point I lose my virginity, as I said, at 17, and I had some sexual episodes with different young ladies, and then I really didn't want to be bothered with having a girlfriend because it just seemed like it was so much emotional drama, and I didn't want to deal with that. So I discovered masturbation, and that just seemed like, man, this is like the solution of all solutions. I don't have to have any commitments or obligations and things of that nature. And from there, that's when an addiction to that really kicked in, that and pornography. And that was probably the hardest thing for me to shake and really get a hold of or control of. And that bled into my marriage.
And what is your view now of masturbation?
So I believe that, and I use a good majority of the book to speak in the context of marriage, right? But even as a single person, there's certain habits that you put in place that if you are planning to get married, I think it's important to be mindful of. And so I believe that the images of masturbation are, first of all, 9 times, maybe 7 times, 8 times out of 10, they're directly or indirectly linked to pornography. Like a man to masturbate, he has to have a visual image in front of him for the most part. I'm pretty sure I know some guys that have become so professional that maybe they don't. But and I can't speak for every fellow, but from my experience and just having locker room conversations with other guys, you have to have a visual image in front of you. Well, unfortunately, the visual image that you have before you is so far-fetched from the perception of reality of what your wife is. It teaches you to look at a woman as an object, as opposed to really not only appreciating her outer beauty, but seeing her inner beauty, discovering that inner beauty. It teaches her to just to be a tool, to be a ends to a means to your orgasmic experience. And I go into this premise of it teaches you to get out of intimacy as opposed to giving out of intimacy. Mm-hmm. So the only reason you're going to masturbate in the first place is you're going to get to an orgasm. If you ask any brother how long it takes for them to achieve orgasm, they'll tell you, I don't even need a minute. You know what I'm saying? In comparison to the time that it would take for a female. So you're already setting yourself up to be in a very tough situation when you come into that relationship with that person that matters most to you, because you're ready to experience a selfless act, but you've been doing it selfishly for a very, very long time, and that's where it contradicts. And then you have the situation where you are intimate with your wife, but you have images of the pornography that you saw. But the reason why it's so addictive, I mean, that's a whole nother cat of worms, or you can't say cat of worms. It's not. I just made a phrase up. That's a whole nother can of worms.
I like it, though. Cat of worms is good. Cat of worms.
Yeah, maybe some cat would appreciate that. I don't know. But that's a whole nother can of worms, because I also don't believe that people pursue pornography or sexual issues just because they purely want to have sex. But I don't want to go too far.
No, I know. You don't want to give away
the conversation.
Yeah, you don't want to give away too much in your book. So did a light bulb go off then for you? Clearly you had an aha moment.
Well, I had an aha moment. I did. Here's the funny part. Even though I was a young teen trying to figure out this sexuality thing, and I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't get like the proper conversations that I felt I should have received, I did have enough sense in me to realize a couple things. Now, again, I'm only speaking for myself. So any other guys listening, I'm not speaking for you and your sexuality. I really don't want to know about you and your sexuality. I'm only speaking for myself.
Women are addicted to porn as well. It's not a solely man thing.
Well, this particular thing of leading to my aha moment, I experienced premature ejaculation at like 17, 18 years of age. And, you look at different studies say different things. That's why I don't, even in my whole book, the way I write it, it's just from my experience. So I'm not trying to say this is the law. But for me, I firmly believe that me conditioning myself to experience masturbation excessively led to premature ejaculation. And I knew, if I didn't know a lot of things about sexuality, I did know from watching TV and women joking about premature ejaculation and 2-minute brothers. I knew that I didn't want to take that into my marriage. And I was sensitive to that. And so that kind of caused me to slow down a little bit. It didn't correct a lot of stuff because there was still a lot of understanding about sexuality at that time that I just didn't get until later on down the road. But it was an aha moment to say, I need to take a break because I'm heading in the wrong direction. And
that's part of your mindset today, that you think people should not masturbate and save themselves, that even self-sex is a form of cheating.
Absolutely. I do believe that masturbation is having sex with yourself. I do believe that it conditions you to be self-focused in the act, and that it conflicts or contradicts when you bring your particular partner into the experience. I have this ideal notion, and a lot of the notions that I have are based on certain biblical principles. I am a pastor. I can't shake that. But I believe that it was the heart of God, which, by the way, somehow throughout the course of time, we've taken God out of the conversation of sex. Even though I believe he created sex, created orgasms. Thank you, God. But
amen, brother.
but I believe that when we look at God and the essence of God being love, love defined in such a way that it gives unconditionally without expecting anything in return. And so if I practice giving unconditionally to my spouse without expecting anything in return, and then my wife happens to practice the same thing, then we enter into this amazing euphoric experience that many people have no clue what that's like, because we've been trained to be conditioned and to look out for ourselves as opposed to looking out for our significant other. So yeah, I definitely do believe that. I know there will be people that would disagree and they'll give justifications, and I'm not trying to debate anyone. It's just, that's the gospel coordinator, Eric.
Well, you bring up a really interesting point, because I think for true intimacy, there has to be true vulnerability, and for true vulnerability, there needs to be a complete lack of reciprocity expectation.
Yeah.
And many books about sex and coupledom and all that stuff talks about being present for your partner over yourself. That's truly a key. And you have, actually, I'm going to read this, if I may, something from your book that I actually texted this to you because I found it really quite beautiful. I'm going to quote you here. I was no longer having sex with her to get a release. I was having sex with her to minister to her soul. I was having sex with her to comfort her. I was having sex with her so that we could both heal. I was having sex with gratitude for the fact that I had the honor and privilege to make love to my wife again. I mean, that's beautiful.
Yeah. We almost did not make it in 2008. She had discovered some inappropriate text. The pornography had bled into me actually reaching out to females on social media, saying inappropriate sexual, having those type of conversations. And my wife discovered that. And Susan, which is really weird calling you Susan because her name is Susan. But
Wife
going
Susan.
through that, wife Susan, going through that place in our marriage, like at one point I didn't know if we were going to make it out. I really, I had no clue that we were going to make it out of that place. I call it hell on earth. It's the worst experience I've ever. It's the reason why I have these gray hairs that I alluded to earlier. And intimacy. I didn't understand intimacy before that, because if I did, I wouldn't have messed with the other activities that I did. But even more so, what I did have, even though it wasn't intimacy, it became far worse than that, because many times I felt like Susan had become a corpse. Like, she would still oblige because she was in a state, well, I don't know if I don't do anything for him, what is he going to do? Is he going to go out somewhere else? But I don't feel this anymore. So she would just be there. And, I was sensitive to that. Like, it became more than a physical release at that point. It was convicting, because I knew this was not what God created it to be. And so when we started to heal, and when we went through the process of healing and really being vulnerable, it took vulnerability to heal. It took knowing that she had to look at the ugliest side of me and still decide to love me. It took her taking this venom that I injected with her, with my actions, and walking her through getting that out of her, even though I didn't want to hear it or face it anymore. It took all of that to get to a place where that began to seep into our sexuality and our expression to one another. And when we finally got to that point where it began to get healthy, that's what inspired me writing that, because I was like, wow, I never thought I'd get to this place.
Well, and also I think that it's important to point out that you both had the patience to know that it wasn't going to happen overnight, that this was a slow development over a long time of finding that space again. And
I hated that phrase. We would go to counselors. I would talk to my pastor. He'd say, it's going to take time. And I did not want to hear it's going to take time. I cringed every time someone said, because when I felt like we were accomplishing something, it still felt like it was going to take so much more time. And, for many men, obviously infidelity is a significant issue in a lot of marriages. And healing from infidelity sometimes feels like it's impossible. I think from a man's perspective, because sometimes they don't want to put in the patience and the time to allow their spouse to heal. They just want to say, hey, I feel really bad. I'm really sorry I hurt you. Can you forgive me? And let's just move on. And they don't understand that. And my wife was so brilliant in helping to paint this out to me. The moment I got my healing and I got this reflection of who I was, and I decided to be a better man, was the same moment when she realized her marriage wasn't what she thought it was. And so I'm leaving out of a situation because it's confronted me, and I've made choices that it'll never happen again. But while I'm leaving out, I'm introducing her to a new world that she never asked to be a part of. And so now she had to go through the journey of questioning every single thing and what was real and what wasn't real and the whys. And I'm like, why do we have to talk about that? I've moved on. I'm healed. I'm the better version. Like, you don't have to deal with that again. And for a lot of men, we don't understand what we're dragging our wives through. And we don't understand the patience that it takes to walk with them out of that in their time. And so, what's funny, Susan, is this the hardest thing that we ever had to go through in our life. But I appreciate it, because I don't think we would be as close as we are now. And I don't think our sex would be as beautiful as it is now if we didn't go through it.
Yeah, amen to that. Absolutely. And it's a tough decision to make for couples as to what they are willing to endure and how hard it is to get from point A to point B, and you have children, and so there's so many things involved in that. As you were starting to, in order for you to heal from where you were, Eric, it required of you some deep work of sense of self and looking back. And you said yourself that you were a foster kid. And so right there, we're talking probably abandonment stuff and attachment stuff and mother stuff and all these things and the divine feminine and, all of this. I mean, that must have been a major aha moment, because if you've been shut down for so long, it's a weird irony, right? Ecstasy, like biblical ecstasy, is an out-of-body experience. It's touching the face of God. And yet, for many people who rely on pornography, when they then have sex with somebody in real life, quote unquote, they are not in their bodies. It is not a grounded place. And so there's this weird sort of irony to that idea of out-of-body and what it all means and what ecstasy means. For me, I feel like it's pretty obvious somebody who's been raised up on porn because they're not in this moment.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. One thing that my wife would ask me often when we were in a place of healing, we were still in ICU rather, and we were trying to progress to the next stage. And during the intimacy, she would ask me, do you see me? And, my dumb husband response would be like, heck yeah, I see you. I see everything that's happening. But going back to look at what she was really asking, she was saying, when you're with me, do you see just me? Or do you see images in your head of other things that you've explored or looked after? And, I got to a point where I felt horrible that she would even have to ask that question. That I was in the moment with her, but in times when I was with her, I wasn't with her. And it really is sad. And you alluded to a lot of this. The journey I went through with healing was it was very rewarding because it challenged me to look at myself and to look at the ugly parts of who I am, which I think many of us humans, I think many of us are afraid to do. We are afraid to say, this is what's wrong with me. And not necessarily to say it to fix it, not necessarily to say it to make an excuse, just saying it to say, this is what I'm dealing with when I deal with myself. And this is what someone else is going to have to deal with when they deal with me. And I'm going to continue to address it, but this is what it is. And, I was abandoned. I was abandoned. I was left at a bus station when I was 5 years old. Never knew my dad. And I didn't realize until I had to unpack this with the threat of almost losing my wife, how much that situation at 5 years old had impacted a survival mechanism within me. Like growing up, I remember it had to be around 8, 9, 10 years old. Some girl stopped me and said, "You're so cute. You're going to be a heartbreaker when you grow up. Can you be my boyfriend?" And as simple as those little subtle lines were, because I knew she was playing. I knew she was far older than me. Like she was like a teenager. I was just a kid. But those simple words made my day because it gave me attention. You gotta understand, my biological mom, who provided all the nourishment that a kid is supposed to have, should come from your mom. She left me. And I had a nourishment deficiency. So me getting that. And so I created this little survival mechanism where I would just learn to get attention from females. And that was like my fix. It wasn't even a sexuality. With all of the explorations that I did, even in my marriage, I never had sex with anyone else outside of my wife. And guys like, yeah, right. Come on, E, you sure? For real. And if I'm going to write a book about it, then I'm pretty either dumb or pretty confident that that's accurate, because at least someone would definitely call me out. But I never wanted sex. I really wanted to get the attention from, first and foremost from my wife. And when I felt like I wasn't getting it from my wife, I just wanted the attention so it could fill this void that I had since I was 5 years old. And I didn't realize it. I didn't even realize that was something that I was wrestling with.
And one could argue that no matter how much attention your wife gave you, it would never fill up that kind of childhood trauma.
Yeah, true. But here's the crazy part about it. I wanted attention, words of affirmation. That's like my thing, right?
Your love language.
But that's my language. But guess what? That is so far from my wife's. But do you know why it's so far from hers? Because you just heard about my upbringing. What we found later on in our healing process, her upbringing was filled with her dad calling her the scum of the earth. So words were used against her to put her down. And I'm feeding for words. She doesn't see the value of giving words because they don't have any worth. And we're clashing because we don't know how to be intimate with each other to uncover the layers of what is preventing our relationship from flowing. I mean, it was so deep when we came into that understanding, like, wow, we've been missing it all this time. And that makes me wonder how many couples are missing it because they never get to that level of intimacy. They get the sex down and then eventually the sex fades, but they don't continue the intimacy and that intimate conversation, and they miss really knowing and understanding each other. So, yeah.
Do you, when you look at kids today, for example, and really not even kids, I mean, I can't put this all on children, adults too, so obsessed with technology in their phones. I mean, people bump into walls and fall into the water and, crash their cars and, all that stuff because they're not present in the real world. They're present into oh, we're losing connection again. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay,
yeah.
Good. As long as you can hear me. They're present into the technology, but not into each other. I went to a party once where the two teenagers were sitting on a couch across from each other, texting each other. Literally across the couch from each other, and they were texting. Now, part of that was probably because they didn't want the adults in the room to hear what they were saying, but there's also another level to that.
Yeah, it is. It's almost like a wall there because while technology has its conveniences, it's also, it's like it gives you, how do I explain it? It's kind of like this barrier. I can be myself, but I can only be myself as long as I do it through this phone. Right, and most people aren't themselves, right? They use technology to troll other people and to beat other people, and But it could continue to threaten this this goal of getting to a place of intimacy. Yeah, it's a complicated relationship because technology gives us so much, and yet it has crippled us. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it has. So how do you discuss this stuff with your kids? I mean, you wrote a book, so clearly if they go and get the book, they're going to hear all of your deep, dark secrets. Yeah, my 14-year-old daughter, as I said, I have 4 girls. I have a 18-year-old son. My 14-year-old daughter said, great, eventually I'm going to go through school and people are going to know me as the daughter of the sex pastor. Thanks, Dad. My wife and I have been intentional to make sure that sexuality and sex was not taboo words that we had in their upbringing and not wait until their adolescence. Obviously, you do use discretion based on the different, like I have an 8-year-old. Certain conversations I wouldn't have with my 8-year-old that I would have with my 14-year-old or my 18-year-old. But, I mean, there are certain things that we intentionally and purposely do. Like they know when the door is locked, mommy and daddy are loving each other. And even the 8-year-old knows that. And that's just a part of which I think is excellent because children also have to see healthy intimacy. It's not absolutely you shouldn't hide that away. I think because that teaches shame, which is another huge issue with our culture. Well, I get so upset with my Christian brothers and sisters in church. We converse about sexuality from a reactive or a preventative approach as far as, well, we just say don't do it, all right? flee fornication and adultery. If we just, those are the only conversations we have about it. And there's different reasons, possibly there's certain insecurities that folks have that they don't feel comfortable discussing it. But if we don't talk about it, if we don't have the conversations, then we're really setting up our kids, because they are curious. I mean, you see what they can do with technology. It has nothing to do with sex. They can figure out a gadget that we'll have in our hands for like 5 minutes. Like, how do I work this button? And they'll say, oh, that's simple. And they'll do it in 3 seconds because they have an inquisitive mind anyway. So how much more are they going to continue to soak up and glean information, but from the wrong or from unhealthy sources, if we don't intervene and have those conversations? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's very important for us to be intentional as parents, and I think the key is to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Like having conversations with my son about sex. Like when we first started having conversations, it just annoyed him. Like, Dad, why are you bringing this up? And we have this phrase around the house, like if we're going to have an uncomfortable conversation, we say, it's only weird if we make it weird, right? So I would continue to have them. And then, parents look for these little things as a reward, like you're doing the right thing. One day he comes to me at 16 and he's asking me a question about sexuality. And I've got to keep my poker face and be like, okay. And then inside I'm like, yes, he's come to me. Like all this that I put in and trying to have these conversations, he's coming back to me. And so, long story short, just the importance of pressing through the uncomfortableness to get to a point where you feel like, okay, we can have an exchange and you're not going to be judged. You're going to be loved. And, my goal is to just walk you through that.
Now, since sorry, don't mean to interrupt.
And the other point is not feel like just because, like a lot of parents would be like, well, I don't even feel qualified to talk to my kids because then they're going to ask questions about my past. And man, if they do that, then they're going to come back and say, well, if you did all of that, why can't I? You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, you know what? One of the biggest things, I don't hide this information from my kids about this journey that I went through, because now they get to see the good and the bad. And maybe them seeing the bad will say, for my son, I don't want to take anyone down that path. And for my daughters, that helps me to look at what type of mate I'm looking at, as far as certain things that I saw that my dad has exposed, both the good and the bad and the ugly. So I think it all matters.
Now, since for you, masturbation, you think that's something that you shouldn't do and that you should wait to marriage until you have sex. Am I correct in that?
I think that you should wait until marriage, and I think that even in marriage, it could still be very tricky. I think, in the context of a sexual union with a husband and a wife that, the Bible says there's no limitations in the bedroom as to what you can do. So if that's something that you and your wife are doing, that's great. But I think it still can be tricky if you're married, but you're still masturbating on your own. Like if your wife is helping you out, that's great. And that's an expression. But if it's something that you're doing, you could still slip into that self-focused expression as opposed to selfless.
So how do you teach your children, or for that matter, since it sounds like you're a pretty open pastor, how do you talk to parishioners who come to you for advice? How do you incorporate this concept without putting a veil of shame around it? Because a lot of people, the discovery of their own bodies, that's how they learn what they like and they don't like and things like that. So I'm curious how you can learn about who you are and what you need in the context and the framework of what your belief system is.
Well, first of all, a lot of parishioners don't come to talk to me about that because that feels weird and they're just not in a place where they feel comfortable. As far as the discovery, this feels really old-fashioned, and I hate to say it like this, but I really believe that the act was intended to be something that a husband and wife are supposed to discover together. And I think that when we start exploring on our own, that's when we kind of goof it up. And I know that that's really difficult to say in 2019 because, as you said before, the exposure of technology puts so many things in your face prematurely. Well, I just think that that's the result of us living in that type of life. But I think the original intent, sexuality in and of itself, is supposed to be a reminder of the covenant that a man made with his wife.
But you're also you're not homophobic. From my understanding from reading your book, you're okay with same-sex couples as well.
I am not homophobic. I'm not homophobic. I do believe in the Bible, and I believe in what the scriptures say about just about everything. And I know that I was listening to a conversation you had with a pastor.
Oh, yeah. Stan Mitchell.
Yes. And I respectfully do not agree with everything he says. I don't like being in the same box as, like, what we like to do is we like to typecast and say, you're this because you say you believe in this, you're this. We do it with politics all the time.
Sure.
So I believe that I believe at the end of the day, the Bible is very clear on its positions on certain things, but I don't believe that there should be discrimination on anybody at any level because you identified them doing something that seems that it's contradictory to what Scripture says. And so I think that one thing that the church does, because they're very uncomfortable with the topic of homosexuality, oh my gosh, they have their radar guns out and they are ready to blast. And, I've been in settings, we've had settings down here in Prince William County where I've built some great relationships with folks that are homosexual, transgender, had great conversations. And it was birthed out of the one situation was a Board of Education and whether they were going to decide to make locker rooms and bathrooms used for, both genders. Now, because I prescribe to what the Bible says, there was one side of the seat that I sat on. But I was really grieved that so many Christians came out, Susan, it felt like it was a crusade. Like they were out to just let's go attack the Christian or the homosexual agenda. And it was like, it grieved me. So I left out what was taking place there. And I went to talk to this transgender person. I had a great conversation. And we don't sit on the same side as far as what we believe. Mm-hmm. But our relationship is so much deeper than that. You understand what I'm saying?
That's the whole reason for Hey Human is to speak.
That's what I was going to say. That's why I love your show. Because I shouldn't, when we get to a point, whether it be in this conversation, whether it be a conversation about race or whatever the topics are, when we get to the point that we're in areas where we disagree, it puts us in a place where we cannot tolerate or live in the same space, where we can't respect other person. So even if I don't believe in what you believe, I still have to respect you. I have to respect the rights that you have. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So I do my best to walk the line of being very clear as far as what I do believe is according to, I believe in the Bibles. I know some people believe that the Bible is antiquated and it doesn't apply for 2019. You're talking to a person that from the age of 5 dealing with abandonment, not having a father, and coming out to be the productive person that I am in life. The main source of who I am and what I am was because of me following passages and scriptures according to my faith. So that's where I align my faith on certain things. But it also, if nothing else, the main character and the hero of what I believe in is Jesus, and everything he embodied was love. Then if I am saying that I believe in him, but I'm demonstrating a lack of love to people that don't believe what I believe, then I'm just throwing my faith out the window. It's a piece of trash. So didn't mean to go down that tangent.
No, it's very well said, Eric. I mean, I think that's very well said. when you decided to become a pastor, you said six and a half years. Was that a tough decision to make given your history, or did it make it that much easier because you thought, well, now I personally believe that the dark night of the soul is one of the greatest gifts that we are given on this planet, because we can't understand and have empathy for our fellow humans until we've experienced some of the deep tragedies of life. And I don't wish them on anyone, obviously, but without learning of our own darkness, it's very hard to touch the light, Yeah,
and I agree with you. 100%. It wasn't necessarily my past that was the concern for me. It was more so because I don't care what position you're in. I'm willing to believe that there's a dark journey that you have, that there's some things that you really wouldn't want to let somebody in on, as far as if they took a path down your time machine. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
It wasn't necessarily that part. It was more so, I was comparing myself to pastors that I saw and telling myself, I can't be that. And feeling a sense that God was leading me to and showing me, I'm asking you to become a pastor or a representative for me, not so that you can be that, but that you can speak to a group of people that can't understand that. Like a lot of stuff that I do is out the box. It's very unconventional. I'm very, as you can tell, I'm very transparent. I believe that our transparency is a golden key of not only understanding who we are, but making a connection to the next person. And a lot of people in the pulpit are afraid to be transparent because of the image that they're trying to portray.
Right.
The only person that I'm trying to impress for the rest of my days is my God and my wife and my kids. You know what I'm saying?
There's great power in great vulnerability. I think that
absolutely.
You take away, as soon as you take away other people's ability to hurt you, in other words, when you are fully in yourself and say, this is me, warts and all, nothing can hurt you, because nothing can penetrate that depth.
You got that from 8 Mile, didn't you?
8 Mile? Is that Eminem's movie?
You remember when he was in I don't know if you saw the last battle, and so the guy was about to bash on him, but Eminem pointed out all of his flaws like this. I live in a mobile home. I'm trash. I'm this. I'm that. Now what do you have to say about me?
I remember
and the guy was speechless.
Yeah, that's a great scene, but it's exactly right, that if you own who you are, nothing can hurt you.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm so glad. It's funny because as I was reading your book, you and I don't agree on some things. But which is fine, like we talked about. Yeah. But I think I remember sending you this note saying, I am just so happy that a book like this is out there that's talking about all this stuff, even within the context of religion and church and, being a pastor and all that stuff. Because more than ever, I think that conversation needs to happen in the walls of the church. Because look what silence has brought. Yeah, absolutely. It's brought a lot of darkness, and so I'm just glad that this voice, your voice, is reaching out. And you make a lot of call-outs to people. You do continually through a book. You say, hey, if you need someone to talk to, if you need someone to hold you accountable, and I think accountability is a really interesting theme throughout your book. And in fact, you brought up covenant eyes, which I'd never heard of that before. Talk a little bit about this, being each other's, brother's keeper, if you will, in biblical terms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that the funniest, not the funniest, but the craziest thing is that a lot of us go through, and I'll say this in the context of men and husbands, a lot of us go through this very similar journeys, but we're so prideful and egotistical and not willing to be vulnerable and bare our souls that we have no idea that we can help each other out, because nobody's going to put themselves out there. And I think when for me to get to the point where I was to the point here, I had to have some significant mentors, some significant brothers that were my age going through similar situations or maybe a little bit ahead of me. And I even had to have some folks that I was mentoring in my life, because all of that is different levels of accountability. And that's where I found a lot of significant growth. I believe God created us to be relational. And, I think society tries to drive us to be so independent and so isolated from everyone else through our social our social media expressions, as we alluded to before. But we find strength when we are in connection. And so I think that it is a very important key, particularly if there is a man that is wrestling with these type of issues and they're seeing the type of consequences that it's having on their household, and they really don't feel like they know what to do. They need help. One thing I wanted to refer back to, I think that because, and I can only speak in the context of, being a black man that grew up in black culture. So never been white. I'm told my dad is white, but I don't know. I like to pretend that I could be like, I'm part Dominican and part, so I like to imagine sometimes. But anyway, I digress. But being a black male, knowing the statistics that about 60 to 70% of fathers are not in the homes of their children. Like, I don't know what the statistics are with other cultures, but I know fatherlessness is a significant issue in and of itself, because even if a man is in the home, if he's working 12 to 14 hours a day, then he's not spending time with his kids. Mm-hmm. And if he's not spending, particularly if a father is not spending time with his son, then he's not telling him what, like Susan, intimacy in and of itself, even for a man, it starts with his engagement and interaction with his parents. Healthy intimacy starts with a father and a son and their healthy engagement. And in our community, in our culture, if there were any males in our lives, they would say, "You better not cry. Suck it up. Be a man. What are you, a wimp? You a coward?" And so we're taught, okay, I've got to be tough. I've got to hold this in. I've got to just, and so then when do I get permission to be vulnerable? So there might be some guys listening to you say it, and they're saying, I hear what you're saying, but how do I do that? How do I just give in from this complex that I have to be the man all the time, even in front of my wife, and show my vulnerability? Because if I do that, she's going to think less of me. And that's not the truth. That's a myth. But I can tell you, I know that that's something that a lot of men struggle with. Yeah.
And I think that, understandably, culturally, you speak to a really significant issue. And also, I think that men across the board are given that weird story that they're not supposed to feel or show emotion, that they have to be this tough guy. And over time, I hope that's starting to change. But I do think that you're absolutely spot on, that the relationship between parents and children is where it all begins, obviously. And I mean, down to how kids feel about their own bodies and self-worth and all that. And we are mirroring. Children learn, they're insane supercomputers sucking in everything around them. And if they are seeing strange things afoot with their parents or the single parent or, brothers and sisters or uncle, whatever, that is imprinting at such an important time of development.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
There's so much to unpack. I
was going to ask you a question, but I thought if I asked you the question, it was going to unpack so much more.
No, it's okay. Please. I absolutely.
Are you, I know you're in Tennessee, right?
I am, yes.
And you are, from the limited information I know about you, I know that you're a part of the country music community.
I write. Right? I'm a professional songwriter, but I write in all genres. But Nashville certainly is. So
you're familiar with what's going on with R. Kelly?
Yes, I am. Yeah, okay. I have not seen the documentary because I think it's on Hulu or HBO or something, and I don't have those channels, so I have to wait for it to hit Netflix.
So it's interesting when going through what I've gone through and just looking at. I mean, obviously, for one, you see so many things and scandals and everything coming out in the news now,
right?
Which I believe is a result of this suppression. It's a result of, these sexual issues that different men have.
Well, and they've been around forever. I mean, pornography is as old as time also.
Absolutely. Yeah. But for one, women are speaking up, which they have the right to do, and they should be doing so.
Sure.
But I think, it's a time, like, there's a zeitgeist of, certain things and should no longer be tolerated anymore. But even looking at what's going on with his documentary is very interesting. In the first episode of this, series, he talks about a time where he was molested at the age of 7 or 8 years old. And, I having 4 girls, I don't make any excuse for the actions that he ultimately committed. They were crimes. They were inappropriate. I do hope that some type of trial or judgment is done, because it has to send a message that our daughters are valuable and they're worthy. But at the same token, I see a 7 or 8 year old child, because I was 7 or 8, and I didn't go down the road that he went down, but I know what it's like to be exposed to certain things. And it went a step even further with him, because it was actual molestation, and he had no therapy, no counseling, no way. And here's the interesting part about it. It also speaks in the documentary that his brother was molested too. Mm-hmm. And he was a little older when his brother was molested, right? And when his brother came to him and said, I was molested, R. Kelly said, no, you weren't. And don't tell anyone about that. Now, how does a little child or boy just factor in their mind, this is something that's bad that's happened to me, but if I even open my mouth about this, then it's going to impact so many people in a bad way. So I'll just keep shut and suppress it. And so I'm saying, man, this is such a significant issue. My whole heart in writing this was never to offer the solution. I always wanted to offer what worked for me, but I also wanted to provoke the conversation. I'm good at provoking. I wanted to provoke the conversation and say, listen, we need, if nothing else, families, households, marriages, we need to talk about this.
Absolutely, 100%. And speaking to the R. Kelly, and for those listening who don't know, it's a documentary. Is it 4 or 5 episodes talking about?
It's about 4 or 5 episodes, yes.
Allegations that he is pedophilic in nature, and that he preyed on young girls, young artists especially.
Yes.
And I haven't seen it, so I can't speak entirely to what it is. And you bring up a good point, and it is one of those, I know tons of people who have been molested. It's, it's everywhere you turn and look. Some turned out okay, whatever okay means, but, functioning in society without repeating the cycles. Other people repeated the cycle. Some ended up in jail. Some people, took it one step further. And, I talk to a lot of people, so I have had conversations with people that have done some pretty, just things that I would consider personally I wouldn't do, that I consider wrong and unethical or beyond the pale. And the thing is at the same time, in the presence of these people, or in my mind thinking about these people, is that, first of all, I'm not them, so I can't say the kind of trauma and destruction that goes on within the human psyche that then creates a person that then hurts another person. Some people don't respond that way. Some people do. Yeah. Some people go to war and kill others and come home and are fine. Others have PTSD. Others commit suicide. There's how do you know? It's such a crazy, deep, important conversation to say, like, a Ted Bundy who was abused by his grandfather. Does that give him a right to go out and murder women? Of course not. But there's that sense of understanding, but I can see why.
Yeah.
Where is the intervention? Where is the person that could have stepped in and helped him? And maybe it wouldn't have helped. There's so many layers, It's fascinating.
Yeah. See, that's why I didn't want to go into that.
Yeah, except I love talking about all this stuff. I do love talking about it. Yeah. Eric, I don't want to take all your time, but I appreciate that you wrote this book. Tell people how they can find it.
All right. Well, it is officially going to be released on March 8th via ebook through iTunes and Amazon. But you can get the physical copy, or you can pre-order the physical copy now by going to getsexualhealing.com. Again, that's getsexualhealing.com. If you pre-order it, I'll autograph it for you personally. And so hopefully folks will check it out.
And if somebody wants to reach out to you to talk about their own stuff, how might they contact you?
Yeah, you can email me directly at ek1speaks@gmail.com. E is in Eric, K is in Kellum, the number 1, ek1speaks@gmail.com.
And again, the name of the book is Sexual Healing, A Men's Sexual Journey, and the Lessons Learned Along the Way. Eric,
absolutely.
Thank you so very much for being on Hey Human. I really appreciate it. And
thank you, Susan.
Maybe I'll see you at the wedding.
Yeah. I think you probably will.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
All right. Thank you.
Again, everyone, thanks for listening. Please take a moment and rate and review Hey Human on iTunes. Thanks again. Bye.